So we will open the meeting. Whakataka te hau ki te uru. Whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta. Kia mā taratara ki tai. E hiake ana te atakura. He tio. He huka. He hohu. Tihei mori ora. Good morning and welcome to our meeting of the Finance and Performance Committee. And I'll start with item 1, apologies. And I'm just going to check that we've got everything here. We've got an apology for absence received from the Mayor. Apologies for lateness from Councillors Cotter, Johansson, who, Yanni, I'm noting that you're here. So you're not an apology for lateness? No. All right, so we'll delete Councillor Johansson. McClellan, Templeton and Davidson, so that's all for lateness. And then an apology from Councillors Chen, Galloway, Major and Scanderett for absence for a part of the meeting. And Kieran for lateness, yes, thank you. Thank you. I did have a text from Aaron, so I didn't know about that. So Cotter, McClellan, Templeton, Cowan and Davidson for lateness, the Mayor for absence, Chen, Galloway, Major and Scanderett for partial absence. So Sam, you're happy to move that?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I may have to duck out at 12:15.
All right, let's add your name in there as a partial absence as well.
Just thinking about the number of people that are away, Andrew, do you want to schedule a break between 11:30 and 12:30?
No, absolutely not. We need to have this meeting finished by lunchtime.
Yeah.
One of the things I've asked our staff to do is to keep an eye on numbers around the table so that we remain quorate. I'm confident that we've got all the checks and balances in place, but no, taking an hour out in the middle of a meeting that we're trying to conclude within a time frame isn't going to work.
With my apologies too for partial departure.
So Johansson for partial absence as well then, please. All right. Okay, there's a lot going on outside of the building today. It's good to see everybody been so active, but we just do need to keep an eye on numbers for this meeting. All right, so, well, Sam, you've moved that. Do I have a seconder? Anne Galloway. So, moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Against, that's carried. Now, declarations of interest. We've got a number of declarations of interest on the screen. So, Christchurch Foundation, the Development Contribution Social Housing Rebate, trustees of the Otatahi Community Housing Trust conflicted there, and then a number conflicted in the public excluded paper on the procurement approach. So we'll just note those, and if anything else becomes apparent as we move through the meeting as a conflict of interest, do make it known at that time. So now we'll move to confirmation of previous minutes. So I'm happy to move the minutes of the previous meeting. Sam will second. All those in favour say aye. Against, that's carried. And now we move to item 4, the public forum. Now, Graham Robinson, I would invite you to join us at the table. Graham, good to have you with us this morning. Now, public forum normally allows for a 5-minute presentation. I'm aware that what you're presenting to us are submissions that normally would have been made as part of the long-term plan submissions hearings process. You would normally there have had 3 minutes as an individual submitter and 5 minutes submitting on part of an organisation. So I'm happy to provide 8 minutes this morning as the total of those 2 submissions. We'll just combine that time into one 8-minute block. We're pleased to have you with us and able to have you present to the meeting this morning. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with speaking on behalf of the Neighbourhood Association. First of all, we'd like to acknowledge that there are a lot of difficulties the councillors have in trying to balance things, to make decisions when viewpoints come from many perspectives. And we know that you have access to information, the public don't. You also have to abide by rules from central government that determine how you make decisions and force outcomes. I've been associated with some of the people here through the local boards, and I know most politicians are well-intentioned and desire to make a difference. What I'm asking, or what we're asking you today, is to vote against the draft LTP as it is, because if you vote for it, you're saying you don't care about the less well-off in our society. Council is a monopoly and therefore has a responsibility not to disadvantage residents. The inflation rate for the past 20 years has been between 1.5 to 2%, depending on which information you get. The proposed rates increases are 4%. In reality, they're closer to 5% because you add on an increase on an increase. So I think it's 47.8% over the 10 years. From 2006 until 2020-21 year, the rates have gone up in Christchurch an average of 6.1%. I looked at my rates bills for my house between 2016 and the 2020 years, which is 5 years cumulatively. My rates have gone up 34.6%. In England, there is a limit of 1.9% on councils' increase in rates per year, and that is increased to 4.99% if they have council elder care housing. The other thing in the LTP, which seems to be missing to me and I couldn't find, perhaps someone could redirect me, there have been high increases in property values, which will add to rates increases, and therefore there needs to be some sort of mechanism which sets a limit on what people will be charged year on year, so that what may be assumed to be 4% this year doesn't spiral out to 7 or 8% because their properties have gone up severely. The other thing, I don't believe your budget allows for windfall gains. I live in Addington, and there are lots of houses there being replaced. For example, I can think of 2 houses on 1,000 square metres. They're being replaced by 8 townhouses. The council will gain from the fees of those houses being built, but also what was rates of maybe $2,500 per house will be replaced by at least $3,000 per townhouse year on year. So what may have been up to $5,000 is replaced by $18,000 or more. Your decision will determine the quality of life for many families, and you only have to look at the media or listen to the media and they tell you about all the different things that people are suffering. The council is trying to cope with things like COVID, the earthquakes way back, the mosque, all those things interfered with your revenue stream. But the people of Christchurch are also dealing with those difficulties, and they are still trying to recover from the same things. And I think that they're being hit when they're down by the proportion of the increases that are being proposed. The thing you should be aware of is if you take more off people with one hand, you're likely to be having to give it back through welfare with another. You'll see there's a very poorly drawn pie graph on the screen above you. It's poorly done because those divisions on the right-hand side should actually be in fifths of the 10th of the total circle. So if you take that as a pie or a pizza, the first line going up diagonally towards the right, that's the baseline of 1,000. Yep. Take the circle, for example, as it's $10,000 disposable income after people pay their mortgages, etc. So that first line up to the diagonal right is $1,000 for rates. That was set back in 2005. With the increases that have happened over the past 15 years, we've taken to the second line up towards that's it, and that's $2,216 for rates. What you are proposing will take it down to the third line, roughly $3,250 in 10 years' time. The plan says that it's only $2.76 or something a week. The reality is, over a 10-year period, it's an average of about $15 per week, and by the time we get to the end of it, it's $30 a week. And I think if people knew that those percentage increases add up, they would be less in favour of them actually happening. I know a lot of people want to make differences to the environment, and there's a lot of things that need to happen with climate and things like that, but the proportion of rates increases is far too high for what people can afford. And you, like the pie, if you take another piece, that means there's less to be paid for other things in their environment. They're going to have less to pay for food, less to help their families, and that's our argument. What's being taken by the council is is too much and is going to leave the families with a lot less. And that's not just the very bottom, that's even middle class people. I'll jump to my own personal submission. I suggested that the red zone land be given back to Ngāi Tahu. Several reasons for this. One, Ngāi Tahu was cheated. If you look at Kempstead, Ngāi Tahu was cheated out of the amount of reserves they were entitled to receive back in the 1850s. And they were supposed to have got 10% of the available land at the time that the government bought, and were given much less. I do not know if that's been rectified through the Waitangi Tribunal, and I don't know if Ngāi Tahu would actually want the land. The reason I suggest that it be given is that it would rectify that grave error many years ago. Second reason is there's a proposal to spend $800 million over the next 10 years to redevelop that land. Pass that away. We don't need it. We don't need to spend that $800 million if we don't have it. And I also believe that the attitudes of Maori versus Pākehā towards conservation of land are far superior. They would do a far better job than we would. I've got no Maori affiliations, I've got no Maori blood, but I think there's a wrong which needs to be righted. The other thing that I just want to chuck in the mix that I didn't mention in the submission is there are things like the multi-use arena, which are going to cost the council a lot of money. I believe they're going to put a roof on the top of it, and if they didn't have a roof, perhaps they could have put a hotel beside it, which would have allowed viewing of the sports field. But it's just, there needs to be an additional use other than just the sports field for a building of that size, which is going to cost the people a lot of money to maintain.
All right, now that brings us very neatly to the end of the 8 minutes set aside. Some points very clearly made and well illustrated in the submission. And thank you very much indeed for taking the time to come along and speak to the submission this morning. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so just for councillors' information, the written submission is available on the hub to support the verbal presentation that we've just heard as well. All right, so moving on to deputations by appointment, there are none. Item 6, presentation of petitions, there are none. Item 7, performance exceptions report, and I'll invite Peter Ryan to the table for any introductory remarks, and then Peter will take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. I'm aware of the time issues for the councillors today, so I'll try to just simply hit the highlights of this report. By way of introduction, this is a performance report against organisational performance targets. It's not an update or a year-to-date snapshot. The focus is on exceptions. Now, at times that can blur the fact that we're doing quite well, but we do focus on exceptions in this report. Now, to summarise the level of service situation, it's almost exactly as it was last month and very stable. There have been some upsides, there have been some downsides. They net out to a change of only one level of service over the whole month. So, in short, this is very much what you're probably going to get at year end. The forecasts are both accurate and stable over time, so it's very unlikely you'll see volatility between now and year end. The exceptions attached behind that trend line are very similar to those from last month, in fact the last 3 or 4 months. So I guess that would really mean at this point there's not a lot to add other than perhaps taking any questions on levels of service exceptions.
That's great. Yeah, thanks very much, Peter. And just noting your comments on stability and expected accuracy of forecasting, and noting that what we are looking at here are exceptions. There are a large number of levels of service which are being delivered and which are on target as expected. So these are just the exceptions that we're looking at here. Let's move to questions. Are there any questions for Peter this morning? Yanni and then Jimmy. Yanni.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the response around the bus travel time information. Although I guess what's concerning in this report is, and I don't remember how many consecutive times in our performance report, and this is on page 28, that we've been told that we're missing our target, both for more people choosing to travel by bus and improving the reliability of passenger transport journey time. But from my memory, this has been a kind of consistent performance measure that we've failed. And the memo that we got back seems to indicate that we don't have any clear measurements of journey reliability on our bus priority lanes that we've put in. Is that something that we can address in terms of, I know we've been told that we're going to go back to ECAN, but it seems really hard to understand how we can approve a project with a set of indicators around the benefits and then not have any knowledge if those benefits have been accrued or not.
Before Lynette steps up to respond to the technical stuff, just in terms of the first part of your question about usage, this is one of those few unusual indicators in our suite where there is some joint responsibility. Obviously, I think you're aware that we're responsible for the infrastructure around public transport, but not the services themselves.
Yeah.
So we have a partial stake in this level of service, but not complete control.
Yeah.
So I'd preface everything with that, but the detail of what you've spoken about, Lynette will be able to respond to.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm interested too is like the remedial actions don't seem to go far enough to addressing the concerns that's been raised by not meeting these targets on a pretty consistent basis. It doesn't. The remedial action doesn't seem to address the significance of what's not being met, and it doesn't seem to provide any detail about what's going to be done differently.
So one of the things that's being done differently is we are measuring differently in the future, which is why we've proposed to change the levels of service in the long-term plan. However, I can't get across the details of all this for you today because it was being dealt with by other people in the unit and I haven't had time to get across it. So I would suggest today that there's a really busy schedule coming, but in the next 2 or 3 months, we get together with ECAN and have a conversation with you, which is then provides a briefing note out of that. That takes this whole process into consideration because there are a whole number of factors that are measured in the success of the PT. Because ultimately what you're asking, Councillor, is about how do we make the PT network succeed. So there's a whole number of factors that relate to that, including patronage, the weather, reliability of the route. There's all sorts of things, and ECAN do a lot of those measurements. We don't do them. We have to get them off ECAN.
So it may well be that this could result in a briefing at some point.
That's what I would suggest.
When all of that information has been gathered, realising much of this is ECAN that would be holding and providing that information. The specific question that Yanni's asking, though, if I understand it correctly, is around when we approve, for example, public transport lane, a bus lane, there may well be information provided in the report
that anticipates the saving.
That anticipates the journey time saving. I guess what Yanni's particularly interested in, and I would share that interest, is is the factual information, once we've put the PT lane in place and it's in use, do we get the information reported back, or can we, that shows that the forecasting that we based our decision on in the beginning has either been achieved, has been exceeded, or hasn't been achieved?
And I can't answer that question today, I'm sorry.
But it would come as part of that briefing.
But that would come as part of that briefing.
Excellent, thank you.
The other thing, Council, you need to understand is many of our bus lanes went in prior to the earthquakes, and there has been substantial changes to networks since the earthquakes. So we just need to understand that and be able to explain that to you as well.
So I guess the question is, if we wanted a key set of specific measures to monitor the performance of the bus priority lanes that we've put in, what do we need to do? Is it just go to
So
ECAN?
we will come back to you as a briefing because I can't answer it off the cuff today.
Yeah, and that's good. So let's set all of this aside for that future briefing. And if that was, appreciating that people are very busy with long-term plan and other projects at the moment, if that was
early in the new financial year.
Yeah, so in a couple of months' time, 3 months' time, and let's just get something into the briefing schedule and let's have the detailed conversation about it with the information in front of us. That sounds good.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
So can I just check, in the memo, we've been told that ECAN do not currently measure or report on specific bus travel time statistics. So,
Sorry, I can't answer to a
So
memo.
can we
I
put
don't
all
know,
of
and I
this into
didn't
that future
write.
briefing?
Yeah,
Sure.
we'll put it all in. I will note all of this.
okay.
Yeah, and Yanni, if you've got specific questions that you wanted to send through that you want covered in that briefing,
That
it
would be
would be good
useful.
to raise them now, because then that'll inform the information we need to gather and the content of the briefing on that day.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so Yanni, nothing else?
Oh, so just had a question on the high-risk computer system. There's a number of references to it. So just looking at page 30, and this is around respond to customer service requests within appropriate timeframes. Yeah, I'm just trying to understand whether we need to do anything more. We've been told that there's a hybrid health check as a work in progress, many changes planned over the next year. Transport issues remain a high priority for fixing. Then there's robustness of B2B linkages. I mean, I'm just trying to have confidence in our technology system, given that this has been, again, something that's been, I think, for about 5 years now. We've been told, you know, we've got problems and we're working on solutions. Is there anything external that we can do to give us confidence that these systems are adequate and sufficient to deal with what we need them to do?
I think I'll have to ask Sarah to step up on that one. We had a discussion about it earlier. Specificity about what you're looking for, though, would be helpful.
Like, is our technology adequate, and why are we constantly having problems with getting the information from it to provide timely information around customer service requests?
Yeah. So as Councillor, as you commented or mentioned, there is a hybrid health check. So there is a project that is looking at the design and redesign of how we have structured our reporting. Complication being our B2B. So when we send our tickets to our contractors and then being able to come back and tell us that it's been done or it's gone on to a work schedule. That work is progressing well, and while we've said middle of next year it should be completed, we're thinking it's actually going to be completed sooner than that. Right. I'm very keen to produce a memo or a briefing about what it was, what we've fixed and what it now looks like. Because all of the issues that you are raising will be corrected.
Right, okay, so, yeah. And just the final question was around the roading condition. We've obviously had a lot of complaints. This is, again, page 30, 375 complaints received end of April, significant increase in complaints October, November, February, March, general but significant upward trend in feedback, and we're looking at why, but just in terms of our acceleration budget, like, we had the acceleration budget from government. I'm just trying to understand, like, we've had some projects that we've just been given a start work notice that are being done, and then we've got others that are going through a really long, arduous process through community boards that still haven't even started. Can you just give me a sense of the capital acceleration budget? How soon can that money be spent to fix and respond to some of these complaints?
I'd suggest that that's a conversation for the next report, because that's part of a project feedback. But very quickly, the Capital Acceleration Regeneration Fund, the acceleration is linked to regeneration and always has been. It is linked to, so the CRAF has 5 particular areas across the city that you guys agreed, that this council agreed as part of the business case that was put to Treasury, which was agreed by Treasury. Road roughness and smoothness is a different, road smoothness or roughness, whichever way you want to look at it, and our resident satisfaction survey is a different, as a level of service, it's a different level of service. The CRAFT program will contribute to it, but that is about improving livability in particular areas that were particularly hard hit by the earthquake. What you've done as council and proposed in the long-term plan is to increase our resurfacing budget from 2% to 5%, which is the biggest part of what we're trying to achieve to lift that and improve that that satisfaction score. But that's going to take us time. We haven't lifted to 5% yet. We've got to do that over the next 3 years. We're working on that, and it's part of the legacy of a post-earthquake environment that we're working in.
So, but how are some projects able to be funded through CRAF now or already? Like
Because they were in
poles?
the business case and identified in the business case that you as councillors signed off.
Right.
We then went back out to the community. We've been briefing the community boards that are affected, and I believe your boards had 2 briefings of 2 hours long in each session on the different areas that are being done with CRAF, and the team are looking to keep you up to date as they can with what's going on.
So can we get a list of all the CRAF projects that have
You've got
currently
that.
been?
It's in the business case.
We just got the start work notice yesterday.
All right. So
So can I get a list of the? It
let's-
should be easy.
this sounds like something that could easily be either circulated by memo or otherwise simply an email sent with a link to where the information is on the hub. If the information already exists, then that should be reasonably easy to do. Realising that there's obviously been briefings and information made available in the past, but if we can just highlight that as a result of the questions today, I think
Yeah.
that would be helpful.
Yep.
There's some projects under CRAF that have already been started, and we're just doing it right, like quick wins.
Yes.
So I just want to get a list of what they were.
They're all in the business case. Yes, I'll send you the link to the business case.
If we can just get that link recirculated so that people have got easy access to it, I get the impression that that information will answer the questions that have been asked. If it doesn't, then we can deal with the questions through another channel.
In the performance report to actually list what we've done in terms of dealing with some of those issues.
This CRAF is not part of our. I just want to be clear. CRAF is not part of our level of service for road roughness. The measure for level of service of road smoothness is our road roughness measure. God,
Yeah,
I'm
and
struggling with
also
that today,
realising that this is a performance exceptions report, so we're only reporting on performance and we're only reporting by exception. All right, I'm keen to move on. Tim and then Jimmy. Tim.
Thank you. Just following on with regards to the PT stuff, I think it would be really good, just as a holistic thing, to, from ECAN, have timings of the buses and the bus route that we're going to put the work into for bus lanes, etc. So we can understand where the hold-ups are, where the timings go wrong, etc., and what times of days. They can do all this. They had done it for Colombo Street when they did it. They told us they didn't have that information, but then we got it. So they had done it. And then once the PT is finished and given a bit of time to adjust with the route, to look at where the best advantages have been gained, etc.
Yep.
So that's just for future planning for us.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's.
We'll try and add as much as we can to the briefing.
Well, yeah. Well, even if it's not been, it's for the future, because it would. We've got to do this in partnership with ECAN, but we've got to have some information from them. We're investing a hell of a lot of money in with ratepayers' funds in this,
Agreed.
and it'd just be good to know what the results are, and just to work forward on that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so Lynette, you're getting a sense of the kind of information that we really want presented in this briefing that we're looking forward to receiving. Jimmy.
Okay, thank you. I have 2 questions. One is on page 20, regarding to the multicultural recreation community center. You particularly put on the watch list, and it's a red light. Particularly, you emphasize this one currently being investigated, scope and time frame have not yet been determined. But in item 8, the page 69, but you put on the green light. So one is a red light, the other one is green light. So my question is, what's the rationale? Which one is correct?
I'm sorry, Jimmy, you were a little bit fast for me there in terms of the first page reference.
Page 20.
So you're talking.
Watch list is about the multicultural recreation and the community center.
Okay, I'm wondering if that isn't something that Ruth might cover in detail with her PMO report, because this is high-level statistics around the capital program rather than the project-by-project detail that Ruth has. So I think if you don't mind, maybe we could defer that until Ruth's PMO report.
Yep, let's raise that in the next item. That sounds good. All right, Melanie. Oh, further question, Jimmy. Yeah, sure.
But regarding the drinking water supply, I just want to know that I didn't see any update status regarding the Denton Park reservoir repairment to fix reservoir. What's the update status? Before, I remember always you mentioned, but here I
I'm
didn't.
sorry, I can't speak at that level of detail for Helen's program. What I can do is talk to Helen and chase up and come back to you with her response.
So Helen's right here.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, because the community very concerned at this one. Before Christmas to cover this one, that's the problem. Yeah.
Yes, so it's still a work in progress at Denton, almost finished, and then we'll move on to Sockburn.
Okay.
Yeah, so both reservoirs having those roofs redone.
So when will be done? When?
I can't give you a firm answer on that. I can send you an email update
Okay.
for both
Please
of them
do.
if you like.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank
Cheers.
you. Thank you, Chair.
Melanie.
It was just around the resource consenting on page 31. I know it's under a lot of pressure. I was just, I don't recall about, it mentions discussing the possibility of the timeframe being extended under the RMA that's required so we can better meet targets. Do you know anything about that?
Again, that's at a very technical, operational level I simply can't respond to off the hip. I'll have to go back and ask the manager. I'll talk to John and get your response.
Yeah, so if we can get an offline response on that one, circulated to everybody, that would be great. Thank you. All right, so we've got the report in front of us. We've had questions asked and answered. I'm happy to move that we receive the information provided in the report. Jimmy Chen will second. Any debate? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried.
Would it be all right if I had one postscript to this?
Please do.
Very briefly. Obviously, we're at about 83% looking for 85. That's a couple of indicators. I just want to make you aware that there's a handful that would have bridged that gap, which are simply hangovers from COVID. Galleries, museums, bus patronage, all these things have been affected and remain affected by lockdown or simply the absence of international visitors. Audit New Zealand won't permit any pro rata. They operate on a first past the post basis. So if ships don't come, tough luck. You don't get to pro rata that. Yep. Had that not been the case, I think we would have been bang on target. I just wanted to make that point.
All right, and when we get to year end, you know, there's probably some commentary that would be a good opportunity just to have a look back at where we've landed, what's happened over the year that's led us to that point. So maybe expanding on the sort of comment that you've just made when we get to the year end numbers.
For sure, thank you.
Great. All right, thank you very much indeed. All right, so now moving on to item 8, the Capital Project Performance Report. Ruth, welcome to the table. Normal procedure, if you would like to make any introductory comments on the report and just lead us through what you've got to present to us, and then we'll take questions.
Cool, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So in front of you, you have the report to the end of April. I have provided on the slide in front of you here an updated position as of May. So I'm just going to talk to the May numbers, given they're more recent and more relevant. So if you can look up there on the top left, it is a little bit small, but essentially we're forecasting against our core program 358.4 against a budget of 377.1. So that's still sitting over a 90% delivery for core. So we measure our performance against the core. The core program is what we've committed to the city. That excludes the external funded projects, and it also excludes Parakiori and CMUA. In the bottom left there, you'll see the forecast against CMUA and Parakiori. That forecast is sitting at 50% of budget. So the high carry forward that you're seeing in the April report is mainly, predominantly because of the underspend against budget on those two projects. So the breakdown by key delivery units is there on the right-hand side. You'll see that Transport remain committed to delivering 100% of the core program. May's spend is on track. Based on forecast as well, we're doing excellently. Given the current position that we're in, based on what we've spent in June last year and based on our performance against forecasts this financial year, we're doing reasonably well to deliver on the forecast that you see there, core. So we've only got $60 million left to spend in June against the core program. Last year we spent $76 million in June. The Three Waters forecast has changed. I will have talked to you last month about some of the sharper tender prices that we've had in Three Waters. That's continued. So last month it was $9 million worth of savings across 35 contracts. This month it's 14.5 million across 41 contracts. So we continue to do reasonably well there. We have been able to bring forward some smaller projects in order to fill out some of the spend this financial year. Obviously the savings weren't predicted, and so that's a good position to be in and is not reflective of a smaller delivery program. So spend to date, we've talked about that. With May not yet closed though, Transport have already spent 93% of their May forecast, Communities at 83% and Three Waters at 72%, which brings a total spend to date of 313 million across all of Capital, or 283 against the core program. So one more month remaining. It is a double month of spend though, as we accrue all of June work into June, so it's essentially a 2 month of spend, and we remain in a good position to deliver that. So I just want to ask Transport and Three Waters to kind of come and talk to you because they've got the biggest spend forecast in June. So first up, Lynette. So Transport is forecasting a remaining spend of 23.8 million. So this is as of May on the slide in front of you. And last financial year they spent 33 million, so an extra 10 million.
So I suppose our biggest risk is that we do run the risk of a slight overspend, or over delivery, whatever you want to say. I think that's a reasonably minor risk, and as I've discussed in previous months, we have a number of projects out there that are under contract and are really motoring, and it is a little bit of fingers crossed. We've had really good weather, so things have gone well. So the bridge at Marshland is progressing really, really well. The cycleways out through Riccarton are progressing really, really well, and other projects have finished ahead of schedule, so we're getting going. It's great. So yeah, I think our worst risk is that we could actually probably have some slightly bigger bills than we expect because the weather goes well and we've delivered it.
And we would say that's a good problem to have, wouldn't we?
Hopefully.
Overall though, we do have $10 million within the budget over and above the forecast because we're underspending on external funded.
Yeah.
So you do have that $10 million buffer.
Yeah.
So there is a buffer.
Yeah.
So we will be.
All right, thank you. Do we want to take any questions on transport while we've got Lynette at the table? So is there anything on transport that people wanted to ask about? Yanni.
Thanks. So I've actually managed to find the CRAF projects, which is great. So I've got the whole
Got
list,
it.
which is really
I will
cool.
resend the link.
Let's
for
send it
everybody,
anyway
though.
so that everybody's got it.
I guess the
Yep.
question really was, in terms of this report, how do we get visibility around progress on that list? And is that something that we could add to this this report on a regular basis so we can see the progress?
Yes, the progress of CRAF is already on the external funded report.
Right. But the individual ones,
Yes,
because there's
they
a
are
lot of
in there.
small ones.
Yep.
Right, so we could
No,
see that.
the areas are on there, not the
Yeah, so
individual
there's-
projects within the
So there's,
area.
no, there's
So I need,
5.
what was it? We haven't completely finished it, so I need to go back to the project manager who has only just finished. I believe she's only just done the last briefing with the last area as to.
Sorry, as I understand it, there's sort of like 4 components of the CRAF funding. There's the 5 geographic areas. 5 geographic areas, which I understand the process around that. Community board, staff,
Yep.
engagement. There's the PT money, which is again, I think, Greater Christchurch Partnership business case. And then there was a road safety improvements component that is kind of outside of that. Just for the road safety components,
Yep.
I was just keen to understand how we're tracking around that list.
Oh, okay. I'll have to come back to you with an
So-
update. I'll get the team to bring you back
Yeah,
an
well, I
update.
just wondered in terms of a regular reporting, whether
Yep.
this report would be the place to do it, so that a bit like a traffic light system, we can kind of see what's progressing.
Would it not
I
more
think
likely come
it's-
to Mike's transport
Yeah,
committee?
it's more likely to come to the transport meeting through the bi-monthly report.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
So let's do 2 things.
Cool.
Let's, when the work's finished, obviously circulate that information in response to the question, and then talk to the chair of the Transport Committee about how that information comes through to us through that committee and how frequently and in what format.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, and what the budget impact is probably the key.
Yep.
I had a question about the LED lights, but I don't know if that's transport or a different department.
That's me.
So
That's me.
just so we've had a lot of submissions, and well, we've had several submissions into LTP raising concern. Just because we've got, I think it's 19% are delayed from coming from overseas.
Yep.
Is there any capacity to reconsider our order to look at a lower level of Kelvin, particularly because I know we had some work going on around, I guess what we would call, sites of, along rivers or ecological sites, and I just don't quite see the visibility of that.
So, the business case has been prepared and the support from NZTA is based on energy efficiency and is based on installing the lights to a standard level. And at the time that business case was agreed, and I don't know what it is right now, but that NZTA accepted that level and that light profile. When we installed it, we also got approval to install controllers, so that each of the lights has the little plug-in thing on the top. It looks a bit like a add-on, and a Dalek, yeah, and that allows us to control each individual light and the dimness, and we do. So they are dimmed to within standards, as much as we can within standards. We are also currently working with NIWA on a study on the impacts of it to ecological life and ecological areas. That study's due out later this year. I think we would be cart before the horse if we did anything prior to that.
I guess the concern is that rather than put the higher levels in, and I understand Dunedin's got an agreement with NZTA for a lower level around certain areas.
They are not as efficient and you will not get your energy efficiencies.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but even just last week there was something on Radio New Zealand, there's a growing kind of concern that's been raised.
All right, I think the question's been asked and answered.
We've actually given...
Was it on the order? So the order that we've placed, the 20% from overseas that's delayed...
It's ordered,
right,
and we can't undo it.
So, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So we can't change.
Yeah, but that report, Lynette...
And just to be fair, Chair, through the Chair, there's been a number of very detailed memos back to you all as councillors on the light types, the dimming, the business case, so there's been heaps of information through on this.
And you've explained well why it is what it is, and that you've got this other piece of work going on that presumably would inform any changes if we were proposing to make any changes.
Yep.
Okay, that's
point of order. We are getting a report.
And it's not a matter that we're debating today. All right. Who else have I got questions from? I've got Jimmy.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. On page 67, Hoseway Junction Road extension is belong to the transport or not? This one? Hoseway Junction Road, okay, yes. That's good. But in here, because your forecast delivery date will be in May of next year, but here you still emphasize the risk is a red light, particular Kiwi Rail program works in tier to be confirmed. Whether will affect those the delivery date or not.
They're all being factored into the delivery date, but it is always a risk, and a large amount of Kiwi Rail's componentry has to come from overseas because we don't make the type of steel or componentry in this country.
Yes.
So there is always a risk, but it is a low risk now.
Yeah, I know, but your delivery date still focus on
May we're still focusing on delivering.
No change, no amendment. No, okay. Second is major cycle route, South Express route on page 72, the section 1 from Templeton Jones Road to High, this section. But I didn't see any the progress update, so I just want to know what's update status. The column of the update green. Status, no any update.
There's no issues. It's all green.
No update. But what's update compared to previous months? No any update.
Well
it's
good.
It's all on track for delivery.
Okay, so here your April 22 is actually completion date for detailed design or is for open?
It's the delivery date for completion.
It's open.
Yes, and this is an
Delivered.
exception-based report, so if
Yes.
there's an exception, you'll get a comment.
Okay, thank
So
you.
it's on track.
On track.
All right, thank you. Are there any further questions? Pauline, and good morning, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Apologies for lateness. Kiwi Rail, any update? Any positive update on Kiwi Rail with the Northern Line, etc.? Any progress?
Yes. No.
Okay.
Look, we're working really well with them. They've had some staff changes and some and to be fair to QRail, their whole funding model's changing at the moment too, because they're being funded through the NLTF in the next framework. But they're working really well with us. We had a PCG with them the other day. Senior PMO guys were down from Auckland. Everything seems to be progressing as quickly as we can.
The relationships are good.
And the relationships are
but
working
you've
well.
still got the issue
But
with the crossings.
They have a resourcing challenge, and it takes time to work through that.
Right.
But we are working and progressing, and we are meeting every deadline they ask of us, and they are coming back with what they need, and we're moving forward. It just doesn't move forward as quickly as possibly we would all like, but they're working within the resource constraints they've got. They're trying to find ways to achieve the outcomes we want to achieve as well.
Okay, and then if you do get
If we get
the
stuck,
green
we'll
light and the
escalate it.
funding, are they still insisting on doing the delivery? Or
Yeah, they deliver on their network.
okay,
It's their network, they deliver on it. They've got that option.
All right, thank you very much. Phil?
Yeah, thanks, Lynette. Well, just talking about Jimmy's Halsall Junction Road extension, do we actually own that land that goes up to the railway? Is that all ours yet, or does that have...
The land purchase is done for that project.
So that's all done.
Yep.
And I'm just thinking of a way of spending some of your money. How can we do a lot of the work except the railway crossing? Is that sensible?
Not really.
No.
So the benefit is in trying to link it up and have it open. To have the road there and not have it across the railway line will cause a hazard, but also it's having that contractor in that can go right through and get it done. We are doing some of the Waterloo Park side and getting the cycle path through with the South Express team. So that's getting done. There is some work that's being done ahead of it, but in order to put the road up, that contractor will do the civils work for the rail crossing as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't make sense to have them come in and then go away and then come back. That's
I can
expensive.
understand because Kiwi Rail land is sort of sacrosanct. They sort of...
Well, it's their land. We've got to have permission to work on their land.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah, so we are looking at all our options here and seeing what we can do.
Okay.
That's
All right.
progressing as well.
Sorry,
That is progressing.
Yeah, we do own the land.
Yes.
Is what we get. So
Yeah,
we've done it.
land purchase is done.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So that's done with transport. Lynette, thank you very much indeed for answers to questions there. Ruth, back to you.
Great. Helen, Three Waters, so they're forecasting a remaining spend of 30 million in June, and last financial year they spent 23.
So one of the significant projects to be delivered in June is a land purchase. So that's just under 7 million. So that's one of the main things that will contribute to that higher than usual forecast for June. Otherwise, we've got a lot of wastewater and water supply mains underway, and of course we've got an enormous amount of work in the top of the Heathcote catchment in those basins. And you'll be pleased to know that we may be using those basins this weekend with the weather forecast because they are partially operational, although we're still continuing some finishing off works, some control structures, and of course a lot of planting.
All right, Helen, thank you very much indeed for that. So any questions on Three Waters? Tim?
Yeah, thank you, Helen. Page 68, just although the Cashman-Worsley flood storage is green until you get to risks, so there's a risk there where it says part of the footing for the dam has been identified as a wetland. So what would worst case scenario? What would be the?
So we're working quite closely with Environment Canterbury to understand the changes to the consents required when we excavate those basins and create wetlands, because the new freshwater National Environmental Standard and the policy statement are making that rule structure stricter and it looks as though it's going to start to capture some constructed wetlands and might get in the way of us doing works within those wetlands to keep them functioning as stormwater basins as well. So we're just working through Environment Canterbury to understand that consenting framework and to make sure we can get a pragmatic outcome that allows us to contribute to the ecological outcomes through the wetlands and continue to run those stormwater basins as stormwater basins.
Because if you talk to the local community, I mean, that whole valley was known as the Cashmere Lakes. So, you know, I mean, the whole area was technically farmland, but now we've got a bit of wetland. Yeah. But I guess the concern is that these are going to be delayed because people are concerned about flooding. That's really the bottom line, isn't it?
So most of the flooding function and holding water is already operational, so it won't delay that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Phil.
Thanks, Helen. You're saying that Sutherland's Basin is now operational because I know of 3 subdivisions in that area that can't
Some of those
get any
basins,
bigger because they can't empty into it yet. Is that
that's
nearly...
correct. So they're partially operational. So the whole thing isn't operational, but we can use it if necessary.
Right, because
Okay.
some of the subdivisions have got temporary ones until such time.
That's
That must
correct.
be getting very close to
That
being...
is getting very close.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so that's Three Waters. Ruth, any further comments on community?
No, community are looking reasonably good. Their forecast for June is similar to what they had last year. I don't have any concerns. If you have any specific questions around community, Darren's here to answer. But I'm happy to take any general questions now.
All right, fine. Are there any further questions on this report? Jimmy?
Only concern on page 66, Homeby Centre, because every time, even up to maybe today, before, always the delivery date will be by December 2022. But this time I will review your forecast and to delay for another 2 months from December 22 to February 23. But I checked your content, no any the data significant change. So I just want to know what the rationale your forecast date postponed for 2 months.
Alistair will be able to answer that.
Thank you.
Alistair, good morning. Welcome to the table. Thank you.
I won't be able to answer it, but I'll be able to give you I think what Peter, the project manager, is doing is good PM. Currently, we literally had the PSG yesterday, Jimmy, on Hornby. Everything's still projected for December 2022. What that date might indicate would be operational. So we're a construction date is December 2022. That could be the operational date, which is obvious timing of delivery being December. You wouldn't open straight away. You would roll into an operational phase. I'll need to get some further clarity for you on that date change in there. But as of yesterday at the PSG, we were still gunning for the Q4 2022. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I before, like still commit to the mail.
Yeah.
Let's get to rather than just delay.
And just to be fair to you as well, is that we still believe in the buildability and the methodology to build this project within 14 months. We've had that review completed prior to us going to the market. We're in the market right now. We'll know more once we get the tenders back from the market and also their programs to deliver as well, which will inform our next report to this committee. Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Pauline.
A little bit, but I just want to know that when, it might be property or it might be Helen, but when the properties have been purchased for flood remediation works, particularly around St Albans, and then they're resold, does that money go into our general pot or does it stay in the program for the reason that...
I'm sorry, you need finance to unpick that.
All right.
Maybe we could get a response by
Yeah,
email.
if we can get a response
Thank you.
outside of this meeting would be good. It's a valid question, but obviously not one that we're able to answer at the moment. That's fine.
Thank you.
All right, so we've got a recommendation to receive the information in this report, or these reports. Jimmy, you're happy to move. Pauline, you're happy to second. Any debate? Yanni?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say I really appreciate the value of these reports, and it's good to see that there's some smaller things that have been picked up in the commentary, so I haven't asked as many questions as I've needed, which is good. Just to make reference, there's still some concerning things like the bollards in Hereford
Not
Street.
a workshop.
So again, it would be good to get a memo, I think, back on that particular issue. But, you know, I just think the level of information here is really good for us to understand what's happening with a number of significant projects in the city. I do think getting greater visibility around the CRAF road safety improvements, or the list, the Appendix F, would be really important, because previously in our performance exceptions report, we've been told that that budget is being used to address some of the complaints, but what we don't have is visibility of the work that we're just getting on and doing. And I know, because I get the start work notices, that some of that work is actually happening or has started. So it is really good to see that. So, but yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge this report and the level of detail and the way in which staff have picked up on the concerns that have been raised.
Thank you. So all those in favour say aye. Against? That's carried. Ruth, thank you, and thanks to the other presenters. Thanks to the team. Thank you very much. All right, so item 9, the closeout report, wastewater, Colombo Street, Trunk and Beckenham cross connection. So Helen and Rohan. Welcome to the table, and we'll take the report as read, but obviously if there's any particular commentary on this, that would be helpful, and then we'll move to any questions that there might be. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I think the best would be just a quick background on the project itself and what the purpose of the project was. The project is for it's an additional gravity wastewater main that runs down Colombo Street and then also in Beckenham Street, and that is to alleviate flooding in a 6-month recurrence. So basically, in a proper storm event, we don't have overflows into the Heathcote River, which is part of the ECAN consent we've got. So basically, we met that target, and just from my own interest sake, because I'm a bit technical, is the biggest attraction for this project was the inverted siphon we installed underneath the Heathcote River. It's like I said, it's a double up of an existing wastewater main we've got there in the meantime. Now, if you know anything about river crossings, doing maintenance on any of those siphons is quite a pain. Luckily, having a backup system, we can do maintenance more easily on either one of them. So yeah, add resilience to the network as well. And that's the long and the short of it, but I'm happy to take any further questions.
All right, and obviously this project was brought in under budget, which is always good to see.
Well, we did our best. Well, to be fair, the budget was amended as we went out of tender. The prices came back higher than we originally anticipated. Yep. So we needed to do a change request, getting the funding across, and yeah, we met. Well, we didn't exceed the tender price yet.
Yeah. All right, that's great. So thanks very much indeed for the report. Any questions on this? Yanni.
So just picking up on, you know, one of the concerns that I've raised is a number of projects in our LTP or annual plan and how they've been costed. So in terms of the lessons around the cost of the project, the budget being sufficient, how have we addressed that in our LTP?
I wouldn't be able to answer that one.
Yeah, if we can keep questions to this specific project, although Helen, you might be able to give some commentary on that.
So yes, so we do constantly update the costs by looking at what's happened in the market over the last year or so and what's happening in the market across the country. So we try and keep our estimates as accurate as possible from doing that. What we can't do is predict any changes that come along subsequently, such as shortage of materials through COVID and delays through COVID, which did cost us a little bit extra in this last year.
So so on page 89, the rates used for the pre-tender estimate were based on 2015-16 price data and using median values of previously tendered prices as skirt rates. Do we have a sense of how many projects on our LTP that have been costed in that same way?
We've updated the costings since then, so the costings in the asset management plans are updated.
They're updated to the NZTA. In the report references NZTA construction indices, is it?
We look at those as well as anything else that's relevant, and actuals on recent projects is the best measure for us.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so we've got a recommendation in front of us to receive the information in the closeout report, which I'm happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Phil Major. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, item 10, Civic Financial Services Annual Report and Proxy for Annual General Meeting. This is reasonably straightforward. I'll take the report as read. Are there any questions on this? I'm happy to move the recommendation. Phil will second that recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm staying.
All right. So then the next one is the Christchurch Foundation. So Sam, I'll get you to come into the chair for this one. I'll vacate the chair because, of course, I'm a trustee of that organisation.
Great, thanks. Len, do you want to run through it and then we can go to questions?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Linda sends her apology. She did the work on this paper, and it is basically summarises where the foundation came to their position of their budget. We spent time with, or Linda spent time with the foundation, made sure we were comfortable with their recommendations they made to their independent board. Their board has approved that budget, and we basically have endorsed the amount of funding that they're requesting from us, from the council.
I think we're on the quarterly performance report.
This is a budget?
No.
Are you going to do the other?
Item 11, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So the quarterly report, I'll take it as read. The key things that we're seeing in the work that they're doing, it's since inception they've done as much as what they've done as said they're going to do. They've moved out of the establishment phase. They did all the work on the donations from the mosque plus Turonga, and they continue to support that area of works. This is the question, however, you know, if we're looking at quarter 3, quarter 4 and the full year result is really where they'll shine, and therefore this is the work that they've been doing. They're continuing to do it. We're comfortable with the reporting we're receiving from them now, and you know, as we say, we worked with them on the budget and we worked with them on this quarterly report. They've reviewed our content to make sure that it's what it is.
Sure, thank you very much, Len. I've only got one question, and I just think it would be useful to ask it again in public so people can sort of understand it. So just around, it references the 2.5 million of net assets. Can you just talk through the different accounting approach they're taking? Because I think if people were reading that first up, they would think that there was 2.5 million sitting there for any use, whereas a lot of it's tagged for funding.
Yeah,
so can you just explain that?
Yeah, they basically reserve account for all those pass-through funds. So they basically recognise that that's not their money, even though it's recorded as being as part of equity. That's the reserve accounting that they do. So effectively, the administration fund and the endowment fund form the basis of their equity. That's about $300,000, and so therefore, yes, it looks like they've got money to burn, but in fact, they've committed all of those funds to different projects as they go through.
Yes.
So they'll continue to reserve account for that, which is an adequate way of looking after those things.
No, that's fine. I just thought it's worth calling out. There's actually 300 there,
yeah,
in effect, a net equity position. But
and they'll build that. The endowment fund will build over time, and that's the
sure.
what they're going to be doing.
Perfect. Does anyone else have questions on this one? Yanni.
Yeah. So in the review, there were a number of concerns raised about the information that was provided. Particularly one of the concerns was around, I'm just trying to think of the right phrase. It was around the work that the foundation does as opposed to the giving out of grants. So the non-financial aspect of the work and what we were funding. Has that been clarified with us around? So I'm sorry. Here it is. You know, it's more detailed information in reporting, including variance analysis, performance commentary, and comparison of actual outrun with budget, and also, around the I forget what the exact phrase was, but it was around the non-financial operation of the foundation.
The key work they're doing on the things like the bird corridor, the corridor from the Port Hills to the central city, all of those sorts of non-financial socio-economic groups that actually we want to make sure work through, they are doing that as part of it's being non-financial, it's very hard to monitor for our point of view. Remember, we are looking at their delivery of a function to provide philanthropic funds to Christchurch, and that is the key driver. By doing the additional projects like the corridor, they will actually attract more recognition, they'll attract more funding, hopefully, over time, and by working with partners like Meridian, they will get themselves out there as to what they're doing. So we'll see, hopefully, an increase in funds, in their endowment funds and the like, which is being generated through that goodwill work that they're doing through their non-financial. So yes, the report said, hey, look, it wasn't transparent to us, but if you read the basis of their report now, it does highlight the fact that actually they're being a bit more open about what's going on. They're publicly accountable, they're looking at what they're doing, and you know, we can only work with what we receive, but we're receiving what we ask for, and it's relevant.
Okay, but I guess the key question for us is we're giving operational funding, and you know, here in the previous report we were told 2 key questions related to budget which we were unable to get answers to. Were there activities that the foundation is doing that are non-financial, impose material operational costs?
Yeah, and that's what we're saying, is that they will, to make money, they're spending money, and that's the way it will work. And so we're giving them money to do what they need to do under the support agreement. That's how that will work. We are now we're spending more time with Amy and spending time to make sure, like with the budget setting, we now have a good budget that we can revert back to. When it comes to the 4th quarter, we'll be able to see the full year outturn, and that is really where we'll do all that variance analysis. And if we can't do it at that point in time, yep, we've got to question and go back to them and say, why not? Right. And so that is when that will happen. Right. And we won't be able to say that, hey, they spent X amount on activity, non-financial activity here, but we'll be able to see what their overall result would be.
Right, okay. So I think the key thing is when it comes back for the 4th quarter report, we will be really clear around the review, around the questions that were asked, and that information will be provided, and we'll have a greater level of understanding.
That's correct, because I think the work we're doing now with the foundation is such that we're an open book with them, or they're an open book with us, to understand that we've given them the money. You, as a group of councillors, have asked the hard questions, say, hey, you know, is this really the right thing you're spending your money on? They will now say, hey, this is what we've spent our money on, and this is what we're going to do. I think the 4th quarter is the time we want to make that question.
Great. Can we go to Anne?
Thank you. So thanks, Liam. So it sounds like you're saying that there's a much closer working relationship that's developed and developing,
yes,
and that you are content with that. And yeah, so there's transparency and openness, and you're happy about that.
And to the relevance of what we're doing. I mean,
Right.
if there's something that is happening which we don't need to know about, we
Yes.
won't know about. But
Can I just ask you whether you think there is an understanding of the role that Christchurch Foundation does?
much more so.
Much more so, because even just hearing Yanni saying, you know, giving out of grants, they actually don't give out the grants, do they? They actually partner with people to get money, and then, yeah, so that's their main focus, is actually to get those partnerships and be a broker for that money.
Yeah, they join up donees and donators.
They're not a fundraiser. They're not it's a different process.
The element of their endowment work is that they're looking at that, they're building that. That'll happen over time.
Right.
It takes time to develop that. But at the moment, their activity majority is pass-through. So therefore, hey, I've got money which I'd like to give to X foundation, it goes there. It just passes through their book.
Yeah, so basically the money we give them, as you said, they have to spend money to make money.
Yep.
And so the money we give them is to enable them to do that.
Yes.
To get the money to spend.
Yes.
For the city.
And yeah, and that's the question on value for money is they're now addressing through us. They're saying, hey, look, this is what we're doing.
Right.
And it's non-financial and financial activity.
Right. Thank you very much.
Great. Any other questions? So there's a recommendation there just to note the Foundation's Q3 performance report. Catherine's happy to move it. Sarah's happy to second it. Any discussion? All in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Great. Liam, do you want to go to the budget now, item 12?
Thank you.
And chat through that one, and then we'll go to questions again.
As I pointed out, we've worked very hard with the foundation getting this right, and so we basically have endorsed what they've done in their budget setting. The board had said it and approved it. Really, they have shown that they can generate some savings for the council over time. They'll come back to us in year 3 when they need the additional $100,000 if that's still required. That's how they'll work on that. So unless there's any questions, I'd like to take it as read.
Thank you. Oh no, we've got questions first, Jimmy, I think. Yanni, have you got questions?
Yeah, I mean, I guess with the improved reporting, you've got greater confidence that they will, where the money's being spent. What I don't get a sense of in the fee for service model and the robustness of meeting the shortfall in funding. So how are we assured that if we put the money in, that they're not going to come back for additional funding in terms of what we're putting on budget, like in terms of the sustainability?
The key thing for the foundation is, having set this budget, they will have to cut their cloth to meet their budget.
Right.
If they know that they're only going to get $350 from us next year and $200 the following year, that's what they've committed to. It would be embarrassing for the trust to come back. So I believe that they will do their utmost to live within their budget, to make sure that they deliver what they say they're going to deliver, and we can only say that in year 2023, when they come back for their budget setting at that point in time, that they would have met that obligation.
Yeah. And can I just check in terms of our agreement with them? So when does our agreement end?
2023.
2023, and there's no current commitment for anything above than what we've proposed. That's completely up to us to choose the amount.
Yeah, well, even the 2023 budget will go through this committee. Yeah. So when we come to that $200,000, that's what they'll ask for at that point in time. And then, if there's a requirement to do additional funding, they will come to us in any out years. But there's no certainty on any of that funding.
Yeah, so
if they turn around and develop a surplus which doesn't require that money in 2022, we won't be giving it to them.
Yeah, so it's no different. This is just sending an indication to the LTP of the reduced levels of funding. So.
Yeah, I mean, previously we were told we had a commitment for a certain amount of time, and so, but now we've got the discretion, which is good. Just the only other thing, the budget analysis, I mean, 5.11, you talk about the salary costs. I mean, have we benchmarked that against other foundations?
We did work around that with the review with Deloitte's. Where publicly available information is available, we did a review. If there was no information available, we were unable to complete that work. So from a point of view is that that salary is a basis between the board and the employee, not between the council and the foundation.
So there's no really ability for us, if we had concerns with anything in the budget, to raise. I mean, what's the process for us if we had concerns about what's in the budget to raise it?
We have to rely on the board of the foundation to spend within the remit that they have as a foundation and as a charitable foundation.
I mean, yeah,
so
it's really
that is the board's responsibility.
So we can't tag funding to specific things.
So
but I mean, the only mechanism I think is what I'm hearing is that you would reduce that funding if you weren't comfortable. Yeah. But I don't think that's the motive.
The support agreement does not in any way prohibit us, limit us from limiting their spending. So basically, the $600,000 previously used to give to them was a grant with no tag. Now they've reduced their money to a sizable saving. There's still no requirement to tag their funds.
So just before we go, Miles is just going to say something.
We'll be working with the foundation over the next year to move away from a grant approach to this to a fee for service, and so I think they're pretty keen to move away from this grant environment that they're operating in at the moment. And you can see that by the reduced funding that they've put forward. So we'll be able to decide in future funding requirements whether we actually need the service.
Great.
Just to be clear, so there's an ongoing expectation that if they do anything for the city council, we would pay.
No, that's not what he said. What
the
he
fee
said
for
was,
service, right?
No, or
is that
you want to say it, but
look, we'll be working with the foundation over the coming year to move away from a grant environment to one where we pay a fee for a service if that service is required. and we will see how that pans out over the next couple of years of funding.
So effectively, we'd be treated like other organisations they deal with throughout the city. Once we get to the end of the tap being turned off on this funding. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Well, I'm happy to move this recommendation. So Jimmy's happy to second it. Great. Any discussion? Yanni?
I think it's really good. I really appreciate the work that staff have done on this. We've had a lot of answers to the questions that were raised in the review. We've had an increase in transparency of information about where budgets are going and being spent. So, and we've got a significant reduction in the funding that we're putting in. We're putting in significant funding to this foundation since its inception. So it is important that we do have transparency around it. And I think it's really welcome for those of us that recall when it was established, we were sold that there would be other parties that would be contributing. That was the whole benefit of having it outside of council, was that it would attract additional funding for its operations. So I'm really welcoming seeing this today. I think this is a step forward, and I appreciate the work that our staff have done to get us to this point. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And the work that the foundation has done as well.
Anyone else? No, I mean, the only thing I would say is that, they came in for a briefing probably 10 days ago, and they accepted the challenge we laid down some time ago, which was to go away, be less reliant on the council, and to save the ratepayer money. So, I actually think, Yanni and I have probably copped a bit of criticism for, the persistent questioning of this for some time, but it does demonstrate the healthy tension that should exist when we're funding external organisations. The result is we've saved well over $500,000, in the last 2 years, and we've made a very clear line in the sand that going forward, I think Miles indicated that, we will be treated a lot like other organisations throughout the city. So this is a really good thing for ratepayers, but also a really good thing for the foundation. It sort of sets them free in a way that they can go and deliver on what they're really good at without being tied to the council. So on that note, I will put the motion. All in favour? Against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Len.
Thank you, everybody.
And Andrew, do you want to come back?
All right, now I'm noting that we have got a morning tea break, which we were nominally going to be taking at 11 o'clock. What we might do is take just a 10-minute break now and come back at 11. We've got one more item to do in the open agenda, and then obviously we move into the public excluded part of the meeting. So let's take a 10-minute break now. I'll be back at 11 o'clock, ready to start on item 13, the Development Contribution Social Housing Rebate Scheme. So I'll adjourn the meeting now till 11. Thank you. form a quorum, so we will reopen the meeting and we'll move straight to item 13, Development Contributions Social Housing Rebate Scheme, review of scheme criteria. Now, Gavin, thank you for the report. I think the report and the recommendations are reasonably clear, but are there any introductory remarks that you want to make before we move to any questions?
The only thing I need to raise is the development that triggered this review of the rebate scheme is a bit of a moving feast. And so the latest social housing component is now 28 units rather than the 53, I think that was in the report. And that seems to be the nature of this particular development. It's partly social housing and partly Kiwi build, and they keep looking at the proportion of each as part of the overall development.
So when you say it's a moving feast, it's not inevitable that the numbers would reduce, but a reduction in numbers is something that's been considered?
It's possible. We really don't know where they will end up, but we're hopeful that where they're at now, at 28, is as low as it goes.
Is there anything about that that would change your officer recommendation 1C around increasing the fund limit of the scheme from 1.5 to 2.5 million?
I don't think so, because there's also the risk that the development goes back up to where they initially indicated it would be. So I think to cover all bases, my recommendation would be that 1C stays as it is, and that the council does note that the scheme expires at the end of 2022, so there's the opportunity then to re-look at exactly what's going on with the scheme and how much money it really needs.
Yeah, and realising that this is revenue foregone rather than actual funds that we're putting on budget.
Correct.
All right, thank you. So no further comments. So let's move to any questions. Are there any questions on this? Anne?
Thanks, Kevin. Just to understand the other agencies involved in this space, so there are two mentioned in here, City Mission and OCHT. What other ones are involved? There's 6 mentioned.
The reference to the City Mission and the OCHT is that they have developments in the pipeline,
right,
that they will be in line to receive a rebate for.
Yes.
So other ones include the Oxford Terrace Baptist Church, the He Wakaho Trust, the Youth Hub Trust, Te Mahi Korowai Trust, Aotautahi Community Housing Trust. So that's, yeah, so there's a range of organisations that have developments in the pipeline.
Terrific. That's good, thank you. And just another general question that you may not... Where does Kāinga Ora sit in terms of DCs? Do they get a rebate as government?
No, Kāinga Ora do not get a rebate. Yeah.
Right, that's really helpful. Thank you.
So just to clarify, Kāinga Ora do not get a rebate even though they're developing social housing?
Correct. They are... the rebate scheme was intentionally set up that way. So to qualify, you need to be either an accredited community housing provider or a charitable trust with one of your objects being the provision of social housing. So Kāinga Ora, or its predecessor, Housing New Zealand, was intentionally left outside of the scope of the rebate scheme.
Yeah, that's a useful clarification. Thank you.
Yeah.
For the benefit of those that weren't in the room for the previous question, I'll ask a similar question again. Your resolution, your recommendation 1C, increasing the funding limit of the scheme from 1.5 to 2.5 million, would you be able to just articulate the rationale for that increase, that recommendation to increase from 1.5 to 2.5?
The development by Home Investment Holdings, which is the builder that is building the development at Karamu, plus the developments in the pipeline that we know about, the DC rebates will be between 1 and 1.2 million, sort of in that range. So if it's not increased, somebody's going to miss out, and there'll be nothing left going forward. So it's just a matter really of how much we should have going forward if you want the scheme to continue.
Yep. So in order to give effect to our housing policy, your recommendation would be to increase to 2.5 so that no one misses out and we achieve. So your expectation is that 2.5 would be sufficient or more than sufficient, but that 1.5 wouldn't be enough in order to achieve the objectives of the housing policy.
Correct. If it's not increased, I simply don't see that it's going to last beyond the next couple of months.
All right, that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So just so I'm really clear, Gavin, if so, the Aotearoa Housing Trust could receive DC rebates out of this.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Even though the government contracts that are funded well in excess of 100% of the cost of the build over a 30-year period.
They are a community housing trust that an accredited community housing provider, so they come within the scope of the policy.
Right.
I'm not aware that the government actually refunds their capital investment.
Well, they get 130. Oh, anyway, that's
That might be a question for Bruce to answer. Bruce, if you could just explain the mechanism by which the Aotearoa Community Housing Trust benefits from any government funding or government schemes in its build programme.
Yeah, so I will, and I'll also just talk about the totality of our policy approaches, and it is difficult once you start to look at things in isolation and compare it to what we're trying as an organisation, what the instructions you give to us is trying to achieve, which is a growth in social housing numbers, and how the various pieces come together. So in terms of the way that social housing is funded through the government, accredited organisations can get supply contracts that will pay back over time equivalent of a percentage of the market rent. And generally, at the moment, that is sitting between 135 and in extreme cases in parts of the North Island, up to around, I think, about 175% of market rent. The reason why you do that is to, one, get the supply there, two, that the costs of actually providing social housing are higher than providing market housing. What we do notice is that there is an increased level of maintenance required. And this is even before we start to look at things like wraparound services. So that will be often a 25-year contract, paying that amount while it's occupied. It's not built from a cost-up basis of rates, etc. It's looking at that percentage of market rent as the way of funding. Do you want me to spend some time talking about the policy framework, or are you comfortable with that? Yep.
Yep. I mean, it's clear in the report that the recommendation is aligned with the policy framework and the policy is adopted. I think that's been made clear through questions already as well.
Andrew, can I just signal in an amendment to 1C?
All right. So let's finish. Yeah.
Oh,
so
sure,
I'll come back to you at the right time. But yeah, absolutely. So are there any further questions? So a mover for the staff recommendation, Melanie, seconded Jimmy. Yep.
One more question.
Yes.
Okay. 5.6.4, the bullet point 4 in here. So if additional 35 to 80 new social housing units, it's not only limited by the City Mission and the Aotearoa Trust, but also cover some other the housing provider. Am I right? Okay,
This is the fourth bullet point in 5.6.4.
Yeah.
An additional $1 million would provide rebates for approximately between 35 and 80 new housing.
Yeah, this one, yes.
Yeah.
They cover all the housing providers.
For the qualifying housing provider.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
And then additionally, Jimmy, there's the note around not agreeing to the increase, refers back to the do nothing option. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So moved by Melanie, seconded by Jimmy. So that puts the staff recommendation on the table. Now, Sam, you've noted an amendment.
Yeah, just to 1C, just to remain it at 1.5 million. And James Daniels is
Okay, so the amendment is to leave the funding limit at 1.5 and not increase to 2.5. Yeah. Yeah. Does that require an amendment, or could you not just vote against? I don't think it requires an amendment. It's the exact opposite. It's the so 1C is increase the funding limit, and the amendment is to not increase the funding. I don't think it requires an amendment.
The pool is 1.5.
You just vote against.
So by voting it against.
I'm quite happy to put 1C separately, and I'm quite happy for people to debate it. Yeah, no, if the amendment is to not increase the funding, it's the polar opposite of 1C, which doesn't require an amendment. But, I mean, feel free to debate it, and I'll put 1C separately. All right, so I'm correct, aren't I? Okay, so the lawyer agrees with me. That's good. Okay, perfect. All right, so this has been moved and seconded. We're done with questions. Debate. Who wants to debate this? Sam.
I guess I have to now. Look, obviously, yeah, I'm happy with everything except for point C, 1C on that. And I don't say that because I don't think there's a place for social housing in Christchurch. I think that's entirely appropriate. The thing that concerns me with this is there are large government contracts which are being paid for by the taxpayer that we as a ratepayer are now picking up additional tabs for. And I can't see how that reconciles when there are massive government contracts being, there's millions of dollars every day being spent on social housing. And at the same time, we would effectively be encouraging the ratepayer to pay for that twice. So I'm quite alarmed by increasing that fund. It concerns me that the justification is some people will miss out. That's what's happening in social housing anyway. I think there is a place for it with some of the non-government agencies around the city mission and the like, but I'm deeply worried that we would be literally seeing the ratepayer pay for this twice, one through their taxes and then additionally through their rates here, and I'm not okay with that, so won't support 1C.
Sarah, and then Melanie, I'll come to you at the end as the mover. Sarah.
Thanks. Yeah, Sam's right, there's absolutely a place for social housing, and the reality is that we need a lot more of it than we currently have. And we end up, as ratepayers and taxpayers, not paying for the same thing twice, but this money enables more and additional social housing because the social housing sector will have more opportunity to build additional social housing with the funds that this allows. So it's not paying for the same thing twice, it's enabling additional social housing from the outcomes that are achieved from this.
Jimmy.
So at the moment, we are all aware, the environment, the situation of the Christchurch, still bigger the gap between the supply and the demand regarding all those social housing. And also we heard from the staff earlier, at the moment it's several kind of housing provider would like to align with the council community housing strategy to assist to provide all those housing, the community and the social housing to meet those low income vulnerable people's need. That's the fantastic, so we need to to support this one. Yes, thank you.
Anne.
Kia ora, thank you. So Christchurch has always been a champion of providing community housing, social housing, community housing, and it's because of that that we're in a much better place with that than other places around the country. So this supports staff recommendations support our council's community housing strategy, which is to incentivise and sustainably fund and support community housing. So let's continue in that fine tradition providing housing for those who are not in a position to have to financially to get their own place. So we all benefit from providing safe, safe, warm, dry housing for those who are not in the fortunate position to have the ability to have their own place, to buy their own place. So, fully supportive.
James, and then I'll come to Melanie at the end. James.
Thank you. Look, if you want to see an outcome and you don't want the council to necessarily be undertaking that activity themselves, then an incentive of a financial nature is a good way to achieve that. There is a connection here and there is a point to where I'm going with this, but the Central City Residential Rebate Scheme was created for a purpose. That's because for our city to be successful, we want to have more people living in the central city. We want to make it more affordable for the purchasers to be able to buy those properties and tip the balance. And it makes it a more attractive proposition from a development perspective. So that works. I've supported it. And the fact of the matter is it's an outcome that I want to see. There's a need for it, and just as there's a need for more people to live in the central city, there is also a need for more social housing in Christchurch. There is an undersupply, and people are suffering, and they're living in places that are not warm and grossly below par. So there is a need. There is a need for this. It's not money paid for by the council. It's foregone revenue. And I think for consistency, if there's one outcome that I believe we should be supporting, which is more residents in the central city, then on the other hand, I also believe that this is a genuine need, and I think incentivising it's a cheap way for the council to be able to incentivise an outcome that's going to make Christchurch a better place. So equally, I'm happy to support that, and I'm also happy to support it at the $2.5 million level as well in 1C.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm also happy with this in its entirety, so happy with the staff recommendation. There is a place for social housing. There is a need for social housing. I think we see that regularly. And there's also a need for support for social housing. And it's great that governments have got schemes and systems in place to do that. But I don't think that absents council from performing the role that it has in supporting that need for social housing and, in fact, its own housing policy. This is really about a best for city approach. And I think anything other than the staff recommendation, putting what we know to be too little of an amount in place, having the cap too low on this, would actually bring about a suboptimal outcome. We've heard from staff that if we went with the 1.5 million, some providers would inevitably miss out because the funding would be used up. We would get to the cap within a matter of weeks. We've heard from Sam MacDonald that there are some organisations that he would not want to miss out, who are those that are not co-funded by government. Of course, there's a risk that that could be an outcome because, as we've heard from staff, we don't know which provider it would be that we would miss out, that would miss out. So that could easily lead us to that suboptimal outcome that I've just described. Not putting enough money on budget for something that we've already, or not putting enough money within the cap for something that through our own housing policy that we adopted quite recently we are wanting to achieve makes no sense at all. And all the reasons we would do this and all the reasons that we would put a sufficient cap in place, realising that this isn't a budget, it's revenue foregone, so it's revenue that we're not budgeting for so that we get a particular social outcome, to not put the required cap in place in order to achieve our own policy recently adopted makes no sense at all to me. So for that reason, I support these changes to the scheme, and I particularly support putting enough of a cap around the funding in place to actually deliver what we're wanting this to achieve, rather than cutting it off at its knees before we even start this next phase. James.
Are we voting on just 1A, B and 2 and doing 1C separately?
I'm going to put C separately.
Yes, cool.
Yeah, but we're debating everything in the one debate at the moment.
Oh, okay. Well, I do support 1A, B and 2, but we'll be supporting, obviously, 1C. C. Yep.
Yeah, so you'll be supporting the 1.5, not the 2.5?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, before I come to Melanie as you close the debate, is there anybody else wanting to speak? All right, so Melanie, I'll come to you last.
There's no point me even speaking. Everybody's already said everything, so it was brilliant. Thanks very much.
All right, so I'll put the whole of the motion, in fact, no, what I'll do is put 1C first. All right, so all of those in favour of 1C, say aye. Aye. Against? No. Okay, can we take a division on that, please?
Okay. Councillor Galloway? Yes. Councillor Turner?
Yes.
Councillor McLeod? Yes. Councillor Goff? Yes. Councillor McDonald?
No.
Councillor Cotter?
Aye.
Councillor Davison?
Aye.
Councillor Chu?
No.
Councillor Coker?
Yes.
Councillor Templeton?
Aye.
Councillor Daniels?
Carl.
Councillor Chen?
Yes.
So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 4.
All right, thank you. So that's C is carried. So in that context, I'll put the rest of the...
Oh, Aaron, sorry. Sorry, didn't see. And Councillor Keogh? No. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4 against.
Okay, so that's carried. So in the context of C being carried, I'll put the rest of the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now we move to the resolution to exclude the public. Now, because I'm conflicted on one of the public excluded items, the advice that I've received is that I should not be in the chair for the resolution to exclude the public. So we now need to elect a chair for consideration of items 14 and 17, which is the resolution to exclude the public, and item 17 in the public excluded agenda. I'm happy to nominate Pauline Cotter as the chair for those items. Sam MacDonald will second. All those in favour say aye. Against? That's carried. So, Pauline, if you'd like to come into the chair for the PX resolution and then item 17. Thank you.
Cheers, this meeting today, isn't it?
It's just the people from we've got coming into the
Okay, so I'm sitting here to move that we go into public excluded for items 15, 16 and 17, and that Brent King and Steve Walsh be able to remain in the room after we go into public, after the public are excluded. Item 15 is minutes. Item 16, the reason is prejudice, commercial position and conduct negotiations under section 7(2)(b)(2) and section 7(2)(1). And item 17, maintaining legal professional privilege, commercial activities, conduct negotiations under section 7(2)(g), section 7(2)(h and section 7(2)(i). Do I have a seconder, please? Mike, put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Opposed? It's carried. Right, we'll just give a couple.